Okay, today's daf is Masechta Zevachim Daf Samach, and just to review, just there's a couple, just one major point. That's it. That's what all we're doing the first half of the daf. One point we learned in the Gemara before on Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph that like this, the Gemara Rav said a statement. Okay, we'll just focus on Rav's statement. Amar Rav Mizbeach Shenivgam. Okay, a mizbeach that got damaged. Suppose, let's say, a missile hit it. So what happens if kol hakotshim shnishchatu? Let's say right before the mizbeach was hit, they shechted karbonis, and then they repaired it. Okay, they repaired the damage quickly. So psulim, then all those karbonis are apostle. Why? So Rav brought a pasuk. Basically, the point is that since there was a moment you couldn't do anything, you were in limbo because there's no mizbeach there. So therefore, the carbon is possible. Once it's like cast away and it reaches a moment where you can't do anything about it, the carbon is possible. Comes along the Gemara and asks a question to Rav. There's another mizbeach called the mizbeach ha-pnimi. So the Gemara asks at the end of the page, Va'amar Rav Gidol Amar Rav, Rav himself said that Mizbeach Shenekar, the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the inside Mizbeach where you burn the Ketairis on, if it like disappeared, somehow it got stolen, right? So then Maktirin Ketairis Bimkaima, you could throw the Ketairis on the floor of the Heichal. You could just make a fire there and put the Ketairis there where the Mizbeach once stood. So the Gemara on this asks the question, how could Rav say that when the Mizbeach is damaged, you can't do anything, you're in limbo? You're not in limbo. Why are you not in limbo? Sprinkle the blood on the floor. That's the Gemara's question. Answers the Gemara, Kidi Amar Rava. Rava said, Moida Hoya Rabbi Yehuda bedamin. Even though Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that Shlomo HaMelech made the floor of the Beis HaMikdash holy, that Shlomo HaMelech made the Beis HaMikdash's floor holy, that really, if you don't have a Mizbeach, you could burn the fats, and you can make a fire anywhere on the floor and burn the carbon. But the problem is, bedamim, blood is specifically have to be sprinkled on the Mizbeach. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. So the blood, somehow the Torah was makbid that you have to have a mizbeach. So hachinami moide Rav bedam. So the same way Rava said it about Rabbi Yehuda, Rav would have to agree that once the mizbeach is damaged, so you can't sprinkle blood on the mizbeach. So therefore, the outside mizbeach the carbon is in limbo, and therefore, if the mizbeach was damaged, the carbon becomes pasul. Now, why did Rabbi Yehuda say that Shlomo HaMelech said that anywhere in the Beis HaMikdash, you could bring any carbon you want. You could just make a fire there and like burn the hectare. What was the story behind that? So the Gemara brings a pasuk, and I'm going to call up the pasuk on the screen here again. That the Bayomahu Kidash HaMelech, what happened was Shlomo HaMelech made such a party for the inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash, of the first Beis HaMikdash, that the pasuk says that Kidash HaMelech es HaChotzer. That's the point. That according to that the Toich HaChotzer, Shlomo HaMelech made the floor of the Beis HaMikdash holy. Why? Because he said there was so many karbanos that he was bringing that kotin mahochil, it was so small that the Mizbeach couldn't handle all the karbanos. That he offered 120,000 karbanos on that day. I don't know, figure it out how it's possible. But that's what the pasuk says. So what are you going to do? Are you going to make the fire and burn everything? So they added fires on the floor. That's why they made the floor holy. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's understanding of the pasuk. Because of that, we're going to learn that Rava said that although Rabbi Yehuda understands the pasuk this way, that they made the floor holy. However, Rabbi Yehuda was maida that any carbon that was slaughtered on that day, they had to sprinkle it on the mizbeach. They had to sprinkle it on the mizbeach. That was Rabbi Yehuda's understanding of that pasuk. And what we learned yesterday, and briefly, was Rabbi Yossi disagreed. He said no, there was enough room on the mizbeach to bring the karbanos, right? So the Gemara is going to ask a question. So I'm just going to briefly review a little bit, just to. It was a big back and forth between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. How do you learn pshat? So one of the one of the one of the one of the thing. We'll start from Amalei Rabbi Yehuda. One of the tainas that Rabbi Yehuda had against Efshe Kohen Oimid Agabe Mizbeach Vavoidi Biyadoi V'chol Ha'am Royin Oisim B'chutz. Is it possible that you're going to learn that the Mizbeach was so tall? According to Rabbi Yossi, the Mizbeach was 10 amas high, and therefore, when the Kohen stood on top of the Mizbeach, his head was over the curtain because the curtain was 5 amas tall. According to Rabbi Yossi's understanding, the Mizbeach that Moshe made was 10 amas tall. Basically, this is the conversation. So when a Kohen goes on to the Mizbeach, his head is over the outside curtain and can be seen by anybody. So Amalei Rabbi Yossi says you misunderstood the pasuk. Even though the pasuk says that the curtain surrounding the chotzer in the Mishkan was only 5 amas, that's not. It was really 15 amas, and what it means was 5 amas above the mizbeach. If the mizbeach is 10 amas, then the curtain around the chotzer was 15 amas. That's what Rabbi Yossi says. But there's a pasuk that says that the curtain surrounded the mizbeach. So if the mizbeach is 10 amas, how could be the curtain only 5 amas? Ma mishkin yud amas, af mizbeach yud amas, v'oime. And there's a pasuk that says, Chloim chamesh esrei. We go to Amid Aleph, Ama ala kosef. So Rabbi Yossi has a pasuk that says that the curtain was 15 amas high. The mizbeach was only 10 amas high in the Mishkan, and therefore, when a person stands on it, if you're on the outside of the curtain, you don't see what's going on inside. So then, if the mizbeach is 10 amas, that's the question. According to Rabbi Yossi, the mizbeach is 10 amas. Ma tamad laim shalosh amas kamasai. Why does the Torah say that the mizbeach was only 3 amas? Misvas soiviv l'mala, from the edge of the soiviv, which is this picture over here. That according to Rabbi Yossi, again, Rabbi Yossi's opinion is don't take the pasuk literally. The pasuk teaches you that Hashem said that the mizbeach should be 3 amas, but according to Rabbi Yossi's back and forth understanding of Chumash, is that the mizbeach was really what 10 amas. And when the pasuk says that it was 3 amas, it was 3 amas from that belt that was around there was a belt, so to speak, around the mizbeach. It's 3 amas to the roof of the mizbeach, excluding the corners. So the corner itself was 1. So basically, you have the amma of the yesod, 4 amas in between. Then you have another amma for the belt. So that's what's 6, 7. Then another 3 amas is 10 amas. Okay, that's 3 amas. So that's how the Gemara learns. So Rabbi Yehuda, so the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda ki gama gzer shava barach b'huda gama. Says the Gemara on a question. So there was a gzer shara, ravua, depending how your understanding of the Gemara. Frank the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, here's the same question. Rabbi Yehuda said that the Mizbeach was 3 amas. You read this pasuk literally. If the Mizbeach was only 3 amas, and the average human being is 3 amas, when he goes up that ramp, when you do anything on that Mizbeach, people could see you. You know, if you go up the ramp, people could see him. Because even though the curtain was 5 amas, but you're going to stand on a ramp to go up onto the Mizbeach, which was 3 amas tall, and then the man is 3 amas. So you're basically 6 amas, you're tall, 3 amas for the Mizbeach, 3 amas for the man on top of the ramp. So that's 6 amas. and the curtain around the Mishkan was 5 amas, according to Rabbi Yehuda, because you read the psukim very literally. Rabbi Yehuda is very literal. So, so the Gemara says everybody. So Rabbi Yehuda has the same problem. Answers the Gemara, right? Uh, when you're standing erect, you're 6 amas, but when you're bending over and doing something on the mizbeach, you're actually 5 amas, and therefore nobody sees you. That's what the Gemara says. Ni the kohen mischaze. You can see the kohen avoided biyodei like mischaze, but you don't see when he's doing the avodah on the Mishkan. Says the Gemara, another question. Bishlam Rabbi Yehuda hainu deksiv kidash. Now I understand. Rabbi Yehuda says that Shlomo HaMelech made the floor holy. Ella Rabbi Yossi my kiddush. How does Rabbi Yossi learn pshat that he made the floor holy? According to Rabbi Yossi, Shlomo HaMelech brought all the karbonos on the mizbeach. Answers the Gemara, lahamid ba mizbeach. That's what it means. The pasuk means that Shlomo HaMelech made the floor holy so that it's worthy of building a mizbeach, but not that the floor itself is holy that could take the place of the mizbeach. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Rabbi Yossi hainit ksiv katoin. Now, I understand what Rabbi Yossi said, that we understand what it means when it says katoin, that Moshe Rabbeinu's they retired Moshe Rabbeinu's mizbeach when they built Shlomo mizbeach because it was too small. El Rabbi Yehuda, my katoin. Why does it say that Moshe Rabbeinu's mizbeach was too small? Really, it should say that Shlomo HaMelech's mizbeach was too small, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk means to say that Shlomo HaMelech's mizbeach was too small. That's why the ground was holy, so you can build fires on the ground. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, the pasuk only says that Moshe Rabbeinu's mizbeach was small. Answers the Gemara, Hachi Kama. This is what the pasuk means to say. Mizbeach avonim she'asa shloim etachas mizbeach and achoishes katan hava. The pasuk is actually saying that that Shlomo HaMelech's mizbeach was too small. But why does it call it the copper mizbeach? Shlomo HaMelech's mizbeach was not the copper mizbeach; that was Moshe's mizbeach. What the pasuk means, that the stone mizbeach that Shlomo built to take the place of the copper mizbeach was too small, and that's why it was too small for all the karbonos of that day, and therefore Shlomo HaMelech had to allow people to build, make the fire on the floor. Mar Sava done chutz mechutz, vein done mechutz mechutz b'pnim. Mar Sava Rabbi Yossi holds done kli mikli, vein done mikli b'binyan. So that's how their source is, but that's not the point. The point so far is basically, if you're following, there was Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda are arguing on 4 things. Okay, did the floor of the Beis Hamikdash have a holiness to it so that you can bring karbonos there? Rabbi Yehuda says yes. Rabbi Yossi says no. And how big was Moshe Rabbeinu's mizbeach? How wide was it? And also how big was the pyre there? And then we had a machlekes how high the curtain was, whether it's 5 amas or 15 amas. How big was the mizbeach? Was it 3 amas or 10 amas? So there's 4 different ways of machlekes. So now this is the whole point that we brought this whole exercise, is to get to this point. That's how Gemara works. Rabbi Amar Rava says, Moide Rabbi Yehuda bedamim. Rabbi Yehuda says, Moide agrees that although Shlomo HaMelech allowed people to build fires and on the floor of the Azara to accommodate all those hundreds and thousands of karbonos that they brought on the inauguration day, however, Rabbi Yehuda agrees that anytime that even those karbonos, you had to sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach itself. How do you know that? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda says, on Erev Pesach, they brought thousands and thousands of karbonos for the Karban Pesach. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's possible, very possible, that somebody shechted his Karban Pesach and nobody collected the blood, and the blood ended up on the floor. And the guy went home with his slaughtered lamb, and his blood was never sprinkled on the mizbeach. So kois echad haymamalim idam ataruvis v'shayfkei ala gabe mizbeach. So Rabbi Yehuda said that they would take a cup and take it and fill it up from the floor, from all the blood on the floor, and just make one splash on the mizbeach. Shim shafech damei shalachas mem nimtzah zeh machshira. That was the way that if someone was missed his sprinkling on the Mizbeach. So that's why at the end of the day, at the end of Erev Pesach, right before they closed shop, they took all the blood, a cup full of all the blood that was on the floor, and sprinkled it on the Mizbeach. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Now, the Isal Kedaitach, if you hold Rabbi Sava Rabbi Yehuda Kul Azar Mikacha, if you hold, like Rabbi Yehuda said, that the entire Mizbeach, entire floor of the Azara had a holiness because Shlomo Melech made it holy, so as soon as the blood hit the floor, already it was sprinkled on the Mizbeach because the Mizbeach is the floor according to Rabbi Yehuda. So it must be that no, even the bloods have to be sprinkled on the Mizbeach. Says the Gemara, the Dilma, Mishum Diksava Shvicha Mekayach Ha'adam. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda has said that you had to pick up the blood because as it made it to the floor, it fell from the animal. It didn't fall from a cup. That's why when it fell to the floor, it didn't. You weren't yotzei. You have to sprinkle it on the mizbeach proper. So the Gemara says, okay. So Rabbi Yehuda said that you have to scoop up a cup full. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, why did you have to walk to the mizbeach? Why couldn't you sprinkle, pour it back onto the floor? Because if, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the floor had a kedusha, that's what you could do. Put it on the floor itself. And says the Gemara, maybe Rabbi Yehuda refused that idea because v'dilmam shim debeina mitzvah min amuvchar. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda requires a mitzvah min amuvchar to pour it on the mizbeach. But b'diavad, if you poured it on the floor, it would also be good. So the Gemara even just like backed away for what Rava said, that Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that the floor of the mizbeach is holy, that you could, make a fire and burn karbanos there. But Rava said that Rabbi Yehuda would agree that the blood itself have to be sprinkled on the mizbeach. Comes along and the Gemara says, not so fast. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda would agree that the blood itself could be sprinkled on the floor, and the fact that in Psachim Rabbi Yehuda said you should sprinkle on the mizbeach because mitzvah min amufkar, if you could sprinkle on the mizbeach, sprinkle on the mizbeach. But if you can't, because the mizbeach is disappeared, then you could sprinkle it on the floor. Okay, the Gemara now moves to a new topic. Amar Rabbi Lazar said, mizbeach shenifka. If the mizbeach got damaged, ein oichlin begina shiara mincha. You can't eat the leftovers of a mincha there. Leftover of a mincha is eaten by a kahanim in the azara. Because Shneimah, the pasuk says, "V'chlu matzas eitzel mizbeach." The Torah says, "Eat the mincha next to the mizbeach." V'chi eitzel mizbeach achlu. Did they have to sit next to the mizbeach and eat it? Elo, what the pasuk means, bizmanshu shalem. When you have a complete mizbeach, then you can eat the kache kachem. You can eat the mincha. V'loy bizmanshu chaser. But if the mizbeach has a damage to it, you can't eat the shiare mincha. So the Gemara says, okay, ashkechan shiare mincha. I find I agree with you that if there's no mizbeach there, if the mizbeach got damaged, you can't eat the mincha, the leftovers of a mincha. But kache kachem and olam. How about, let's say, a carbon chatas? The meat of a carbon chatas was eaten in the azara after the person brought the carbon and was eaten by the kahanim. How do I know if the mizbeach has a damage? You have to throw out the meat. Talmud loima kodesh kachem. So there's a gzera shava of kodesh kachem. The Torah calls shiare mincha kodesh kadashim. So any kodesh kadashim, even a chatas, if the mizbeach has a damage to it, then you can't eat the kache kachim there. So kache kalam anayim. Now let's say if a person brings a shlamim, okay, and somehow a missile hit in the mizbeach when the mizbeach got damaged, chas v'shalom. So now you're not allowed to eat your kache kalim in Yerushalayim anywhere because they have to send out a text. Don't eat it. How do you know that that halacha applies? Abaya says, Rabbi Yosi taught it to us. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yosi says, Gimel Devarim Mishum. We go to Amid Beis. Gimel Zakenim Ze'ach Mehem. We find this is one of them that we heard from different elders, and this is what I heard. Rabbi Shmuel Oimer. Rabbi Shmuel says, and this is going to prove that you're not allowed to eat kache kalim in Yerushalayim if the mizbeach is not there, if the mizbeach is damaged, because the Rabbi Shmuel says, I would think that you should bring your Ma'aser Shein in Yerushalayim bizman hazeh, and bring it up to Yerushalayim, even though we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because you have to be Meiser, and Meiser is you have to do Meiser Bisman Hazeh, as you know, in Eretz Yisrael. So bring the Meiser Sheni to Yerushalayim. If you have the fruits, bring it up to Yerushalayim. So the Gemara says, "V'dinu." I would say not so. Bechor toin havos moken. Meiser toin havos moken. Bechor needs to be brought up. If a kohen was gifted a bechor, he has to bring it up to the Beis Hamikdash to eat it, to slaughter it. Ma bechor eine el b'fnei abayis. So just like bechor is only because you could only do it when the Beis Hamikdash was around. Af meisa eine el b'fnei abayis. So also Meiser Sheni was only when the Beis Hamikdash was around. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ale bechor shekein toy matan damim ve'emer legab mizbeach." The bechor needs the mizbeach. In order for the kohen to eat it, he has to slaughter it in the Beis Hamikdash. That's why bechor bisman hazeh he doesn't bring it to Yerushalayim. But Ma'aser Sheni, if you had Ma'aser Sheni, all you have to do is bring it up to Yerushalayim, and that's it. So maybe Ma'aser Sheni you should bring up to Yerushalayim. And says Gemara, so Gemara says, I'll prove it from Bikurim. Ma'ale Bikurim shekein to unin hanacha. No, Bikurim Yechichu. That Bikurim is fruits that are gifted to a kohen when the Beis Hamikdash was around. And when the Beis Hamikdash is not around, you don't bring Bikurim. So I'll say, Ma'aser Sheni, when the Beis Hamikdash is not around, you don't bring Ma'aser Sheni. So the Gemara says, Ma'ale Bikurim shekein to unin hanacha. I would say, no, Bikurim needed the Beis Hamikdash because you have to put the new fruits right next to the Mizbeach. And then the Kohen picks it up from there. But a Ma'aser Sheni didn't have to be even being brought to the Beis Hamikdash. So maybe, so the question is, the Brisa asks, Rabbi Shmuel asks, if I have Ma'aser Sheni in 2025, how do I know that I don't have to bring it up to Yerushalayim? Talmud Loime, because the pasuk says, "Vaveshim sham olasechem zevchem b'karchem ma'isres." The pasuk compares, it juxtaposes a hekesh. Makish masa lebechar. There's a hekesh, and you can't ask any questions. Ma bechar eina lebefnei abayis, af ma'isa eina lebefnei abayis. Ma'isa sheni can only be when the Beis Hamikdash is around, and the hekesh tells you that. So therefore, here's your raya. Ma'aser Bechor is the Gemara is going to tell us Bechor is kachim kalim, and it only is when the Beis Hamikdash was around, right? Bechor is only when the Beis Hamikdash was around. So therefore, when the mizbeach is damaged by any kachim kalim, you cannot eat it anymore. That's the Gemara's proof. Says the Gemara back into that sugya, v'neheder dina v'neisa b'ma'atzad. Let's prove that. What do I need this pasuk of the hekesh? I could have a mahatzad from Bechor and Bikurim that they both don't apply when the Beis Hamikdash was around. What do I need the hekesh for? Answers the Gemara, mishum the ikal mifrach ma'alatzad shavish shebehem. The Bikurim and Bechor, if you just learn from a mahatzad, shekain yesh behem tzad mizbeach, because they both need the mizbeach. And therefore, that's why they needed the Beis Hamikdash. But Ma'aser Sheni maybe doesn't need the Beis Hamikdash, and because if it doesn't need the Beis Hamikdash, you would have an obligation to bring it up. So that's why I need a hekesh to tell you, no, Ma'aser Sheni is a hekesh to Bechor, and it doesn't apply when the Beis Hamikdash was around. Says the Gemara, my Kesava. What does he hold? I Kesava. What is this man the hold? Why ikisava kedusha rishayna kitchel l'shaycha v'kitchel lasad lavai? If he holds that there's a kedusha now in the Beis Hamikdash afila b'char nami. So then, if there's a kedusha in the Beis Hamikdash, why can't I bring the b'char right today? You should be makar of it, because you could be makar of the b'char even though there is no Beis Hamikdash. That's what the Gemara is thinking. If this bandiyama held that means harabayis has no holiness to it. Then you could ask a question, the same thing, since you could ask the question that by Bechor also, that let's say right before the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they destroyed the house, but the meat is still around. So the question is, can you still eat it? I mean, that's the question. So what does this Manda Amar hold? Amar Ravina explained, Loilam Ksava Loikitcha. Really, there is no holiness around in the base of Migdash. Here we're talking about right before the second base of Migdash was destroyed, the Bechor had a sprinkling on the Mizbeach. And then the base of Migdash was destroyed. And the meat is still around. The iskas besare ledamai. And we have a hekesh that the meat has to be like the blood. Ma dama mizbeach, just like the blood is only when the mizbeach. You can only sprinkle when there's a mizbeach around. Af besarai mizbeach. So also the meat can only be eaten when there is a mizbeach. Okay, we're going to stop right here. So, but the point, what we're trying to say over here is, how do I know a kachim kalim carbon, like a bechar, which is, or a shlamim, which can be eaten all around Yerushalayim? If the mizbeach is damaged, you can't eat it. So the Gemara says that everything is like bechar. Bechar is kachim kalim, and there's a hekesh between the meat of the carbon of the bechar to the blood of the bechar. Just like the blood, you can't do anything when there is no mizbeach. You can't sprinkle the blood, so the blood needs the mizbeach. So also there's the meat of the bechar needs the mizbeach there, and if the mizbeach is damaged, then you can't eat it. And how this would reflect is, let's say, if you took home your carbon pesach, which is kachim kalim, and then you get a text, hey, the mizbeach has a damage to it, don't eat it. You can't eat it. That's what we're discussing over here. Kachim for sure, and shiore mincha also. That's the main source. Okay, we'll stop right over here. Good to know.
Thank you.